Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I realized that I have been muted. But just welcome everybody to our webinar. If you have any questions as we progress through our slides here, please enter them in the Q&A box. And if you have interest in seeing our past webinars, those are available on our website and also on our YouTube. And you'll see the link in one of these footers as we progress through the slides. So our topic today is the family's role in recovery. And our objectives are to just briefly talk about addiction as a family disease, have an overview of the family as a system, talk about the impacts of addiction on family members, discuss recovery as a family process, and the benefits of family involvement in a person's recovery and treatment. Talk about the stages of recovery for family members in addition to the individual themselves. Discussing how treatment can help, and discuss what family recovery looks like. And we're going to have just a brief slide on some types of family therapy to really delve into some family dynamic issues as people are progressing in their recovery. Okay, so addiction is a family disease. This slide may look a little familiar from a couple months ago for those of you who joined us for that webinar. But just to recap, a lot of times when people are early in the process, early in the stages of change, a lot of times we hear that I'm only hurting myself. And, as we have worked with individuals and with families, we know that that's certainly not true. And we know that the behaviors of somebody in active addiction have a ripple effect that impact the family, the community, and the entire society. And family is impacted on every level: emotional, physical, financial, and social. Social in particular because of the stigma surrounding substance use disorder, even now. So we'll get into those, some of those a little bit more in a couple slides. So the family as a system, this is from an article by Lander and colleagues. So I wanted to talk briefly about family systems theory. So all the family therapy models share the basic principle of family systems theory, which basically just says that the individual can't be fully understood or successfully treated without understanding how that individual functions within their family. So it views the family as a whole made up of interactive parts, and any change in one piece of the system will impact all other parts of the system. So the field of family therapy uses the term homeostasis to describe what happens in between relationships, as well as how they're maintained for better or for worse. The idea of homeostasis is important to understanding the effect of substance use disorder on the family. Each family member tends to function in a way that keeps the whole system in balance, even if it's not healthy for individuals in the family. So, there's this idea that there's comfort in the familiar, even if the familiar is not ideal, if it's unhealthy, if it's dangerous. And that's kind of what we're getting at here. An example of this is that a child might cover up her father's drinking by cleaning up after him if he's sick, getting him into bed after he passes out, and minimizing the drinking to her mother. These behaviors minimize conflict and keep the family system fairly stable at the moment by reducing fighting between the mom and dad. While the behavior reduces conflict, it also contributes to drinking behavior continuing. So, one reason why families and systems try to maintain that balance is because a change in one family member forces the rest to adapt and change, also, as I said. It might be helpful to think of the family system as a mobile. When one part in a hanging mobile moves, that affects all parts of the mobile, but just in different ways. And each part adjusts to maintain a balance in the system. Involving the family in treatment can help protect against behaviors that can reinforce that status quo, which has become active use. So, by addressing family members too, that can help them examine and change some of their beliefs and behaviors that might unknowingly be sabotaging the person who is making an effort to seek treatment and get sober. So if an adult son tries to get sober and his father feels as though he's lost his drinking buddy, he might say to his son that he can have just a couple beers while they're, watching the game. And this might unconsciously put pressure on the son to continue his use so as to not jeopardize his relationship with his dad. These behaviors can be seen as an attempt to maintain the comfortable equilibrium of the system, because as one person changes, it upsets the equilibrium of the whole family system. So therefore, family therapists and professionals in the field propose that treating the entire family as a whole is much more effective than treating one member individually. All right, impacts of addiction. So that can include, this is on family members in particular. So that can include certainly a breakdown of trust in the family, a sense of loss or disappointment as addiction and using behaviors are prioritized over relationships and families' needs. It takes a heavy emotional toll. So that can manifest as things like anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbance. There was a 2018 study I found that was conducted from late 2015 through 2016, and it was designed to explore the extent to which the use of alcohol or drugs by one family member affects the emotional state of other family members. So they used a scale, the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, and it was administered to 143 participants. So that was 111 women and 32 men, ranging in ages from 19 to 70 years old. So participants were relatives of an individual with substance use disorder who were being treated at the Icelandic National Center for Addiction Treatment. 30 of the participants were an adult child of a parent with substance use disorder. 47 were a spouse, 56 were parents of a child with substance use disorder, and 10 were siblings. So in the subscales for depression, anxiety, and stress were used to take a look at which family member, parent, child, partner, or sibling was kind of most impacted by their family member substance use. So the results showed that 36% or more of the participants in all three subscales had average, serious, or very serious depression, anxiety, and or stress. So that's higher than studies of the general population in Iceland. And actually, the analysis showed that it made really little difference to the family members' well-being which family member was affected. So it didn't matter if the person with the substance use disorder was the child or the sibling. They found that that wasn't really a significant factor in those scores. So all that to say that, so if addiction is considered a family disease, then we should approach recovery as a family process. So all of those impacted by addiction, substance use disorder need help with recovery. As a person is actively using, moving through early recovery, trying to get sober, the structure of the family unit becomes weakened because, it's upset by these transitions. The balance, the typical balance is disturbed. So all the family members then need to learn a healthier dynamic. People seeking recovery and their loved ones can benefit from regular attendance at support groups, 12-step or otherwise, family counseling, and other individual or group counseling programs. So we'll talk about that in some later slides as well. So to talk about the value of family involvement, this is involvement in the treatment process for the identified client, the person that's actually in treatment. The value of family involvement in treatment cannot be overstated. The involvement of family members in addiction treatment is important for two primary reasons, and these are kind of interrelated. First, as we talked about, families are negatively affected, and family services can help reduce the harm to individual family members and to the entire family unit. A second reason for family participation in treatment is that family involvement increases treatment entry, enhances treatment completion, and is also linked with better treatment outcomes for the individual coping with the addiction. The family member can be an important factor in engaging individuals in treatment because they're more likely to recognize warning signs of substance abuse early on in the process compared to the individual with the addiction who might not recognize or acknowledge the problems of their use. Family members also tend to be highly motivated in treatment and typically want to help their loved one reduce their substance use, improve their relationship, and also just help them recover from their own problems that substance use has caused for them. So this can have a positive impact on motivation remaining in treatment and following through with aftercare recommendations. So in addition to those, family members can help identify and address challenges that might relate to use and create a setting that discourages relapse after discharge or after going back home. So a person's substance use can be aggravated by friends and family who also abuse substances. It can be exacerbated by mental illnesses, conflicts, and unhealthy interaction patterns within the family. When family members are engaged in treatment, they have the opportunity to unlearn some of these behaviors and work toward healing during the process of recovery. They can help their loved one begin to find ways to cope without using drugs and recognize or start to identify and be mindful of substance use triggers that can occur within the family dynamic. So addressing these difficulties as a component of treatment can help non-using family members begin to feel as though they have an active role and can be helpful in a person's recovery and help start their own healing process as well. And lastly, according to research, when a person's family is involved in their treatment, they are less likely to relapse. This can be partly attributed to having a safer environment at home to return to. But when a person's family is fully involved in their treatment, they're less likely to feel anxious and disconnected after they have sought treatment, inpatient treatment, or when they're engaged in outpatient treatment. Instead, they receive affirmation and compassion, which can help them resist cravings and urges to return to use. Benefits for the family unit for being engaged in the treatment process and engaging in their own recovery. They can achieve a better understanding of the nature of addiction and how it affects behaviors. So this is an education piece. And just as the person has been assessed by assessed, the family has an opportunity for self-assessment and insight, potentially from a treatment provider or a treatment professional. They can become aware of family dynamics, and unhealthy family patterns will contribute to continued substance use. So therefore, getting everyone in the system involved in treatment will help obtain the most positive outcome. There's a focus on improving communication. In a system where no one may have communicated before or with very little emotional involvement, improved communication is essential and also requires some investment by everybody that's interested in seeing the person with the substance use disorder have a successful outcome. Regaining trust. Dishonesty and substance use sometimes go hand in hand. So family members may be a little leery to start the rebuilding process, but improved communication, honest interaction, and witnessing positive change can help mend this area as everyone is kind of moving toward recovery. Sharing feelings during active addiction, that can burn a lot of bridges, and family members might be angry, but unable to express it. They might fear relapse. They might be excited at the possibility of reconciliation. And it takes time to learn how to recognize, balance, and express these feelings. Setting boundaries. So this applies to everyone involved. And clarifying boundaries isn't easy, but it's such a necessary step toward healthy recovery for the individual and for the family. And lastly, learning self-care. In addiction treatment, the focus is on the person with the addiction, but during family engagement with treatment, during family therapy, a parent or spouse may learn that they need to be addressing these things too. They might need to utilize their supports. They might be directed to try things like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, or other mutual help groups, in addition to maybe seeking their own individual therapy. Okay, so just as an individual progresses from active use to recovery, the family kind of engages in a similar process. So the first stage in this, there are 4. The first stage is the drinking stage. So for families, their loved ones' active use is normally characterized by a lot of emotions: denial, fear, rage. The stage can be really chaotic and confusing and traumatizing for people. Typically, the family's emotions are tied tightly to the ebb and flow of the loved one's use. So when their loved one is drinking, maybe they're really scared, the loved one's missing family events, they're feeling devastated, they're feeling angry. And when their loved one appears to have their use under control, however briefly, maybe they experience a glimmer of hope, but potentially also some doubt. Families that are in this stage maybe deny substance use. Tensions might be really high. It might be really tumultuous at home. They might beg, threaten, make ultimatums. They tend to become increasingly isolated and start to think that they have to hide the problem and that no one else is dealing with this but them. They feel the stigma of addiction deeply. The behavior of their loved one kind of creates automatic patterns of worry. And even if their loved one achieves sobriety and gets into the recovery process, that worry can be really hard to shake. So the environment during this stage kind of has 3 different components. So an increasingly out of control environment as the substance use worsens, tightening defenses to prevent or delay systems collapse. So remember, we talked about homeostasis, maintaining that balance in the beginning. and potentially a last-ditch effort to maintain denial. The transition stage is when a loved one begins to shift from active use to abstinence. So families might find themselves navigating different treatment options, overwhelming language and professional jargon. Some families might find that they're really actively engaged in this process, and some might find that they're more on the fringes of this transition and don't hear much from their loved one through the treatment process. Potentially, families and loved ones have settled into a routine of allowing a loved one to navigate this transition stage with as much space as possible while everyone tries to take some time to heal. And there's no right or wrong way to navigate through the transition stage. There are 4 kind of points to this stage. There's a focus on abstinence, some effort to stabilize the out of control home environment. Oh, I'm sorry, three focus points, and then focusing on the individual within the family. So that comes along with the family accepting that the substance use isn't controllable by them or with the person living substance use disorder and seeking outside supports. For loved ones, early recovery is about taking ongoing steps toward recovery. This can come with a lot of trial and error and loved ones connecting with a lot of different supports. So this can be a tense time for family members, sometimes as stressful as active use potentially, because there's a lot of unknown, a lot of fear and worry just kind of hanging overhead. And most families feel themselves walking on eggshells and being really vigilant, worried that they might do something to cause their loved one to relapse. So at this stage, it's crucial that families have their own support. Families can call on counselors, clergy, peer supports to all be a part of this process with them. And talking to other people who have also navigated their loved one's recovery can be a really valuable resource. It might be a one-time journey for a family with their loved one moving into ongoing recovery soon. But for a lot of families, they'll find this engaged in this process at least a couple times. Loved ones can move in and out of recovery for months or years sometimes. And if that's the case, it strengthens the argument for families to have their own support system for this long haul. During this stage, the focus is on continuing to teach the individual and the family abstinent behaviors and thinking, keeping the family in close contact with support programs, if they're engaged in 12-step support, helping them work through the steps. We still see a lot of focus on individual recovery and maintaining outside supports for the family rather than the family as a whole. We see that more in the next step. There can be some attention to the children in this phase just because of the big shifts associated with early recovery and kind of an awareness of potential challenges, the onset of depression or emotional problems, sleep problems, anything that might contribute to a relapse. And ongoing recovery is for a person with substance use disorder is going to be a time when the recovery has kind of integrated into their life. They fulfill their roles and responsibilities, and they have the tools to cope without substance use. The edge of early recovery wears off, and it becomes less intense generally. Some people maintain long-term recovery and face battles with mental health issues, trauma history, Others can stay sober but never quite hit a comfortable stride and can remain a little bit edgy and unpredictable. Family members in ongoing recovery will settle into their own new normal. There's almost never a family that gets to go back to what they had before. Families build something new with some additional boundaries and stronger support. If families don't start to deal with the long-term emotional impact of addiction, they risk struggling even when their loved one is well into their sobriety. Those struggles can be in the form of anxiety, worry, and resentment. So it's important to be working through those own concerns themselves. During this stage, family members might take an in-depth look at the damage that's been done to the family due to the substance use, look at the underlying causes of the drinking or using behaviors. Oops. And that could involve focusing more on couples and family issues in addition to, so kind of coming back to a more cohesive unit as far as the recovery process. Okay, family stages. I just want to look at this quickly. So here is a chart that I found from the one study that we talked about, the family systems model, sorry. And it breaks down really nicely the family life cycle stages, developmental tasks. So those are tasks that families typically experience in that stage, how substance use can impact those tasks, and additionally, how like social work or treatment can help. So, well, families with teenagers, for example, families are trying to balance freedom with responsibility, trying to enable their teenager to have healthy peer relationships, develop educational and career goals. And when you throw substance use disorder into the mix, teens might follow the model of the parent with the substance use disorder. They might have difficulty forming healthy friend relationships because of inconsistency at home when they were younger. There can be school and legal problems and family conflict. We can see anxiety, depression, or oppositional disorders during this age. And how social work or mental health treatment can help. Family therapy, if there's some legal problems for the teen, engagement in a teen drug court, collateral contact with the school, vocational training, and you'll see referral to AA, NA, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, and Alateen in all of these. So I thought that was interesting to look at for just a second. Okay. So what does family recovery look like? It can be learning about the treatment program and the recovery process and being involved that way. It can be participating in intake and aftercare/recovery planning. That can be attending family groups and appointments, offering encouragement and support to the individual in treatment, and attending support groups for family members. That can be seeking out therapy in the form of individual, group, marriage, and family therapy. So family recovery can take a lot of different forms, and it will look different for different people and different types of families. So the important thing is finding what works and finding what is manageable. And lastly, I just wanted to add a little bit of a note here on types of family therapy, or interventions that can be used in family therapy. Excuse me. So an intervention is behavioral contracting. So that can look like a mental health professional or substance use disorder professional working with the family to develop kind of a written contract that's focused on maintaining a substance-free home. The therapist might help the family identify triggers for substance abuse, predict potential problems, and develop strategies to avoid those problems. Behavioral marital therapy, there we go, is a different one. The therapist can help the couple to create a drug-free environment. They might work on coping skills, communication, relapse prevention skills, and reinforcements for abstinence. There's also multidimensional family therapy. So this one is used most commonly with adolescents with substance abuse problems as well as behavior problems. The therapist meets individually with the teen and his or her family. Adolescents work on coping skills and peer and family relationships, while the parents work on maybe their own addiction and mental health challenges, as well as parenting skills. Solution-focused therapy, so that focuses on solving the problems identified in the family right now, kind of in the immediate moment, without focusing so much on how those problems developed. The substance user, the family, and the therapist try to come up with ways to help the individual stop using drugs and alcohol and determine what a home without drugs or alcohol would look like. And lastly, multifamily groups. So those groups maybe meet every week. They give families insight into their own behaviors and let them know that they're not alone. As we said before, very often due to stigma, family members might feel that they're the only ones dealing with substance use, and it can be helpful to learn that others have and are experiencing the same thing. We often see families engaged in this process together, helping one another. So that is our last slide here, and we do have a couple questions. Oh, okay. Thank you. So it looks like everything was just from the beginning when I was accidentally still muted. But if you have any questions, you can take a minute and throw that in now. And as I said, if you're interested or have missed some of our other webinars, those are available on our Firetree website and also our YouTube channel, so you can get caught up to kind of where we're at with the topics. And otherwise, if there are no questions, our next webinar, we're planning for July 18th, again at noon. That seems to be a time that works for folks. And we will be sending out the topic soon, as well as the registration link. So if there aren't any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We hope to see you in July. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.